Alright guys, hands up and I'll call on you. We are not using audio in this room, so as a favour to everybody, if you could just speak up. I know you've been talking for like 5 hours, but if you can, just for half an hour. Alright, hands up guys and I'll call on you.
Mark Zimmerman with Action Esports here. Can you guys talk to me a little bit about the final call to cut the menu wave and then go to Elder? It was a very risky call, but it worked out. What was like the communication like during that point?
I mean, I think it was, we were kind of limited in options because they were pressuring top, so it was pretty much between, we had to control the dragon area while they had the opportunity to also try to control the dragon area or trade the inhib, but I honestly don't think there was much risk at all. They don't really have any way of catching us without Echo, and they weren't in a position to flank either, so I think it was pretty safe. We could get the wave, force them to react to us around Elder, and if they trade inhib for Elder, that's a winning trade for us.
Hi, Cass Marshall, Red Bull Esports. This question's for Björnson. You've been very vocal about your desire to improve and to put on an international stage and prove yourself on that stage. How do you keep up motivation during the regular split, and how do you prevent yourself from burning out while you're chasing these goals that you can't necessarily participate in for most of the regular year?
I think it's just, for me, it's focusing on a lot of smaller goals and writing up a lot of smaller things that I can improve on, because even though I might not improve at really major things, there are a lot of these like really small things that I can track week to week and see I'm getting better and better at this, and that's kind of like my daily motivation is these small things that I can get better and better at. That's always working towards the big goal.
Travis Gafford with Yahoo Esports. Earlier today, Riot Games made the controversial decision to release a pigeon into the arena as a hazard. It was flying around yesterday, it was flying around today. Did you guys get any interaction with that? Because yesterday all the players brought that up in interviews, I guess.
I didn't notice the pigeon at all.
No pigeon for you guys?
I just noticed it flying.
I thought it was like a bug. I was like, whoa, no,
Okay.
it was
No, there was an actual bug too. Like
Oh,
the
really?
bug was like,
It was the bug.
For Parth, what do you think was the decision making behind C9 swapping between Ray and Impact pretty much every game?
I think they like, depending on where they're going to blind for which solo laner, I think they like having Impact and Red and Red and Blue. They do the same thing as P1, so I think that's the decision making behind it. I'm not really sure. It just depends on what they think.
Yeah, it's me, Tyler, ESPN. This is for all of you. NA has a reputation for losing the wildcard teams at MSI. Well, certain NA teams, not necessarily you. What are you guys going to do to make sure that you don't fall out in the planning stage versus, you know, Brazil or Japan or all the other countries? What are you going to do to prepare for those teams?
What's this for?
What?
Just select someone, otherwise they're gonna make me talk.
I'm gonna do the same thing we do against any other team, and try not to underestimate them, and practice really hard going into the match.
yeah, I think underestimation is probably like the biggest thing you can do when you lose to like a lower team. It's like just like taking them lightly and not like doing things you're used to doing, like playing around calls, playing around vision, etc. And I think it's like when you're playing lower teams, like people or better teams that think they're better, they tend to like skip steps, and that usually makes you lose games.
Thanks.
So this question's for Biofrost. You've had a long, well, not a long career, but you've had some stages of development where you played with Double Lift, now you're playing with Wild Turtle, and now you've started to come into your own, and you know we heard fans cheering for you down there. I'm wondering how you've adjusted to becoming a more independent player and finding your feet with TSM, and how you feel about your play now and your goals for the future based off that.
In the first split, when I played with TSM, I was just really excited to be there, and here he helped me a lot with his playbook as well as what to do around bottom lane. I think after I switched and went with Turtle, I had to also learn how to play with like a new AD carry. So there was that transition period, and I think Turtle and I have gotten a lot better since we first played. And we just try to improve on like a lot of small things that people don't necessarily see. Of course, there's also the obvious ones, and we just want to become the best that we can.
Hi, King Lamb, Lol Esports. This question's for Bjergsen. In game 4, you got camped pretty hard. You ended up dying as much in that game as like the other 4 combined. As one of TSM's leaders, and you've been there forever, how did you manage to reset your mentality going into the 5th match?
I didn't really have an issue resetting my mindset. I think it was mostly off of they had pressure in pretty much every single lane, and they were continuously translating it to mid, and I was often dying for trying to defend the mid tower. So I don't see it as me like just having a game where I'm feeding. It's just overall as a team we're losing pressure and they're making the first play. So it was mostly just trying to avoid being in a similar situation in kind of pick ban or the champions where they're able to translate that pressure to mid continuously, and me playing the champion that's so easy to make plays on. So I don't know, that game just went out of my mind as soon as I walked off that stage. It didn't really, I'm not going to tilt on stage, no way.
Andrew came from Slingshot Esports. I want to ask you guys a question on the MSI stage. You're going to go to Brazil. It's going to be really, really long compared to last time. There's going to be a playing stage, and it seems like there's going to be a very short amount of time when it comes to practicing for the coming summer split. So I want to ask one of you guys' opinions on what you think about the fact that you'll be really, really chased for time in terms of preparation for the live patch, and how you think you're going to adjust yourself to match up for the rest of the region that didn't have that time lost in between. I guess part, I guess.
So this is for leading up to MSI or after MSI?
No, after MSI.
Yeah, so I think it's a really strange decision to have MSI be this long, because we're gonna be right after finals in 2 or 3 days. We're leaving and going to MSI, and assuming we're there for the entire time, I think that ends on May 21st, and then 2 weeks after that is when summer starts. So I think at least in the future, something can be remedied where either they shorten MSI or they live maybe like a longer period of time between the next season start, or they have like a bye week for the team that went to MSI. I think, like CLG said last year, they were really disadvantaged by going there because they didn't have any time to rest, and summer is such a long process from season to playoffs to worlds. I think we've already sort of determined that after MSI we're going to take a week and a half off, and even if we are somewhat rusty coming into summer, hopefully that won't hinder us too much, and we're just going to sort of take it slowly coming into the beginning of summer, and hopefully build a momentum towards the end.
Yeah, Tim Seven News and Oracle's Elixir. Question for Sven Skaren. In Game 5s in series, we often see teams play very conservatively and cautiously. You don't want to make the mistake that kind of throws the game in the series. This game, we saw the complete opposite. Everybody was pulling the trigger on, seemed like every play opportunity. Is that something you guys talked about and prepared going in and you wanted to do, or is it just kind of the way it played out?
I mean, after the Game 4, where we just got completely smashed, we just had like a talk that next game we're just not going to be passive. We're still going to try to win our lanes, and yeah, I just don't want to sit back and get shit on like we did in the game before. So yeah, just still making aggressive calls and try to do stuff.
This is Jake Lee from Invent Global, and I have a question for Spencer. Your juggling playstyle is pretty aggressive, whereas Contract usually tries to cover up for the teammates. So you two have played very differently. So I was wondering like how you prepared against Contract playstyle, or whether you just tried to play with your own playstyle as well. So how did you prepare for the match against Contract?
I mean, just like normally, we just had scrims, and since we scrimmed them 2 weeks before we played semis, then we were scrimming C9 like constantly. So I think we all had like kind of a rough idea how they play, like our lane opponents. So I kind of knew what he was gonna do because we scrimmed them so much. So yeah, I didn't really prepare anything special, just that like going off knowledge from previous scrims. And I don't know if we have that different playstyles. I think he just plays more with the team maybe. Like him and Smoothie plays pretty good together, so that's like the difference, I guess.
Hi there, Dave Malone, the other press. Question for Biofrost and Wild Turtle. playing at home is usually a bundle of emotions. What was it like coming back to Canada and playing at the World Finals?
Playing in Toronto in the summer was a really awesome experience. I went to university there, so there was a lot of emotions there, but playing in Vancouver is different altogether because I grew up here and I have a lot of friends that came here. My family was also here, so having those emotions is good, and just being able to channel them in a positive way and having it as like a catalyst for better performance is usually a pivotal way to play better, and it's just being able to have a mindset that is healthy and not getting like ahead of yourself by getting too emotional.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Vincent for the most part. Like when I was in Toronto, it was kind of different for me too because I actually grew up in Toronto and I haven't really been to Vancouver for a really long time. So going to Vancouver was kind of like playing at like spring finals in Vegas for me. Like I didn't really feel that much different other than we're playing for a Canadian crowd, and I think you don't want to let your emotions get in the way of your gameplay, so you just have to focus on the game.
This is for Hanser. So you talked about wanting to prove you're a better carry player than Ray and better tank player than Impact, and you kind of had to do that this series because they swap between them so much. Is it harder to prep for two people and like two different play styles that you're going to have to do because you obviously had a lot more of Sven's attention in the carry versus carry matchups? So what's it like prepping for not only two people but two different play styles?
I didn't really prep for two different people because you know like what each one's gonna play. Like Ray will play carries and Impact will play tanks. So if I just think of them as like one player that when they're on a tank they'll be pretty good, and then when they're on a carry they'll also be pretty good. It's like a lot more easier to prep that way. And obviously in carry matchups you definitely need more jungle pressure because you can stumble one way or another a lot more. And yeah.
You guys, I mean, obviously the last 3 games, Cloud9 looks really strong and very good games, but the first 2, a lot of people were commenting on the fact that it didn't even seem like they were playing like themselves at all. If any of you can, I'd love to sort of get your impression immediately following game 2 of like what you were thinking of Cloud9, how they were playing, and you know what was kind of going on there. Soren.
I think it was pretty obvious. They were just playing uncharacteristically bad. Like they were just dying in lanes, getting solo killed. It's not really what I would expect because C9 has really strong individual players pretty much across the board. So them just all dying in their lanes, dying to ganks, dying to pretty much every play we set up was really unlike C9. And I was trying to reinforce to everyone on the team that if C9 plays better, we have to play better than we did in game 1 and game 2 to win, because I didn't even feel like we played super well in game 1 and game 2. They just fell over and let us destroy them.
Sorry, Casper.
So Hanser, during the regular split, we saw an influx of Korean top laners, and we definitely saw a lot of pressure on you to sort of step up in this new environment, which you absolutely delivered on in spades. I'm wondering, first of all, if you were aware of this criticism or aware of this perception, and 2, if you were, how you overcame it and how you stepped up in this new environment with a large amount of imports.
Yeah, so coming to the split, every team was like announcing that they got a new Korean top laner, and like Someday, Flame, Looper, and everyone in the community was saying that it's going to be a really rough split for like the native NA tops, and that they're going to have to prove themselves. But I think that's mainly just because of how the community overrates Korean players, and like getting to play them during the split, I just realized that they're not as good as the fans say they are, and it was kind of just playing like against mediocre opponents. So it didn't feel like there was too much pressure on me after I played against them, because they're just not as good as people think they are.
Ryan Gilliam, Rift Herald. This question is also for Hanser. How does playing against such a feast or famine character like Kled impact the way that you decide to go about your laning and then go move into team fights?
So Kled's a really annoying champion because he has the 2 forms, and like in early game, he can all-in you and go into his midi form, then auto you and turn back into the mount form, and that can give him like a pretty big advantage in lane, to where if you don't respect his all in, then you're gonna lose. And also, if he does have the pressure in lane, then he's gonna be able to roam a lot and pressure the whole map with his ulti. And so you just have to respect him, make sure he doesn't snowball in lane, and play team fights better.
Any last questions?
Eric, Fashion Esports, for Hotzer. How would you describe how the team's communication structure has evolved over the course of the split, with you stepping in as a shot caller in place of Peter?
So at the beginning of the split, we pretty much had no one to like make decisive calls and like set up plays, and we kind of grew a lot throughout the split, where we learned to set up plays through lanes first. Like I called for a lot more ganks, Soren calls for a lot of ganks as usual, and because the two of us are so vocal, we learned a lot by transitioning our lead into the map plays and map objectives, and through that we both like learned a lot on how to shot call and make good calls throughout the map. And in terms of communication, it's definitely Soren sets up like a lot of the map plays, and then I make more of the like decisive plays, and everyone else contributes their own.
Parth, you've talked previously about what it's like being coach versus coach in an interview previously, and I'm just kind of curious what it was like for you on stage for those 5 games against Reaper.
Not sure. I think we had a pretty good, we spent a lot of time preparing for Cloud9, and it's also hard because you not only have to prepare for like one team, you also have to prepare for what player they're going to play on which side, because it determines which like laner they're going to try to focus on or what they're going to try to blind. And so I think yesterday night we just grinded up a lot of scenarios, and we talked through a lot of what we wanted to do. So the first 2 games were pretty standard in terms of what we expected them to do, what we did. And then the 3rd, 4th games were more adaptations, especially the 4th game where we tried something new that we weren't going to try. And then the 5th game was more all about we should just go into some sort of comfort with what we wanted to play. So I think preparation is super important going into a series, but so is adaptation. Sometimes adaptations aren't good, sometimes they end up working out. Like I think they did a really good job of what they wanted to do 3rd and 4th game. And I think the 5th game we just each had comps that we were more comfortable in playing, and it just came down to execution. So I don't think it was like one way or the other. It was pretty even.
Okay, I guess for Jason and Soren, so you've been on previous generations of TSM. How would you compare this iteration with the current previous generations, and what are some of the strengths of this lineup?
I think this team is super different from the Season 5 TSM. Everyone's a lot more communicative. I think on Season 5 TSM, there's very little communication between the jungle and the support, Lustpoint and Santorin, and Dyrus didn't really know how to call for resources or how to counter the enemy plays that they were setting up dives, etc. But Hotser's pretty much the opposite. He knows how to snowball a lead, he knows when he needs assistance and backup versus the plays that they're making. So I think overall there's a lot more cross-map communication. Everyone would be looking, if we're making a play top, bottom lane knows exactly what's going on. They're even helping with communication or communicating what they could potentially do to counter it, so we understand the reward versus what we might lose. So I think everyone individually communicates a lot more and are also willing to kind of stand back and look at and try to help your teammates as much as possible when they're making plays across the map.
Jake Lee from the Global again. You just talked about how you're going to prepare as usual for MSI. So where do you see yourself end up in the MSI? Which place? Oh, Justin.
I mean, I don't know. I can't say where we're going to be. We need to have a decent placing, otherwise I'm not going to be happy at all. Of course, we're going to get through the plan. There's, I just see us, unless we completely underestimate our opponents, we should be able to get through the plan fairly easily, and it's really just going to come down to how effectively we can practice. I think practicing for MSI is even though people might have said we practice or we train or prepare similarly, it is going to be really different because the teams that we're scrimming are the teams that we're playing in the tournament. So there's going to be a constant back and forth of hiding information, what champions you want to show, what champions you don't want to show, do you want to show your priorities. These couple weeks of scrimming are just going to be a constant mind game between every single team. So I think preparation will go really far in the tournament. And you know, there's this meme about TSM always trying their hardest in scrims and always showing our playstyle and picking what we're the best at. And I don't believe that. It's going to be really important that we don't do anything like that at MSI.
Last question, Tim.
Okay. Felix, a question for you. You guys don't really have the luxury of looking too far ahead past MSI, obviously, but with the summer split, you know, we've seen a lot of ramping up of NA with infrastructure, with more players coming in, a lot of skill growth. And there's also kind of information about, you know, 2018, maybe there's franchising coming in, some of these kind of pressures on the orgs to really perform well and make sure they're telling a good story that we deserve to be in this league. What do you see happening in the summer split? You know, do you see a lot more growth, a lot more intensity in the competition?
Like growth for our team personally, or just
the league as a whole? Like it was, especially in the context of it being so competitive, this split, like top to bottom, first to 10th were so close.
I think every team is going to be trying a lot harder in summer. This year, I mean, we did work really, really hard, but compared to summer, we pretty much worked to the point of where at one point my brain was just completely burnt out. It started affecting me physically as well. So I think everyone's really going to be trying their hardest to the point where they can handle it mentally and physically. I think we don't personally think this way, that spring isn't important and all this stuff, but I know for a fact that other teams think that sure, spring is important and points are important, but summer is what they really care about. So I think everyone will be upping infrastructure and trying harder for summer, definitely.
Okay, we'll wrap there. If you guys hang out for 2 minutes, we'll just give them a chance to get some shots with the cup.
Yeah.